She visited her son's grave and found a stranger crying beside it. But what this woman whispered would unravel a web of lies hidden for years. The cold drizzle of a gray November afternoon fell gently on the cemetery, turning the marble stones into slick mirrors of sorrow. Victoria Blackwood, 55 years old and heiress to the Blackwood Industries empire, stepped carefully along the graveled path, her designer heels sinking slightly into the damp earth. A bouquet of fresh white lilies, hand-picked and imported from Florence, trembled in her glove grip. For 3 years, this ritual had been hers alone, mourning her only son Adrian in silence, in control, in pain that no one was allowed to witness. But today, something shattered the sanctity. Ahead of her, by Adrian's tomb, smooth granite, flawless and cold, stood a young black woman in a faded waitress uniform, clutching a small child in her arms. Both were crying, openly, heartbreakingly, as though the world had ended only yesterday. Victoria stopped mid-step, her breath caught, her eyes narrowed. She had never seen these two before. "Excuse me," she said sharply, her voice slicing through the stillness like broken glass. "This is a private moment. You're in the wrong place." The woman turned slowly. Her face was streaked with tears, but her spine remained straight. Her voice trembled, but didn't beg. "I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was coming today." There was dignity in her, surprising dignity, and something else, something familiar. Victoria's eyes dropped to the child. A boy, no more than 4, stared up at her, and just like that, the air was sucked from her lungs. Those eyes, brilliant green, piercing, unmistakable. She had seen them before. In the mirror, in Adrian, in herself. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice now lower, more dangerous. "Why are you crying at my son's grave?" The woman straightened, wiping her tears with the back of her trembling hand. "My name is Jasmine Washington, and this is Tyler. I work at Bell's Diner. I come here every month because—" She hesitated, eyes falling on the boy as her voice cracked. "Because Adrian was important to us." Victoria's world began to tilt. Adrian had died 3 years ago in a fiery crash at 28. His death had broken her in ways she would never admit. She poured millions into private investigations, desperate to understand his final years, to discover anything, a girlfriend, a confidant, even a single secret left behind. Nothing had surfaced. Until now. Important how? Victoria whispered, barely audible beneath the rain now falling harder. Jasmine met her gaze, unflinching, because Tyler is his son, and I promised Adrian I'd take care of him, no matter what. The bouquet slipped from Victoria's hands, scattering lilies across the soaked marble. Her body stood frozen. Her mind screamed. 3 years. 3 hollow, grieving years believing her bloodline had ended in that crash. And now, standing before her, was a grandson, black, fatherless, raised by a waitress in a world far removed from the gleaming towers of Blackwood wealth. But something didn't sit right. Jasmine's eyes told a deeper story, one layered with caution and fear, as though secrets still held her hostage. Secrets Victoria hadn't begun to imagine. What Victoria didn't know was that this encounter was merely the first tremor in a coming earthquake. Jasmine Washington wasn't just a grieving mother or a hidden mistress. She was a gatekeeper to a truth that, once unleashed, would shake the very foundations of Victoria's carefully constructed empire. If this tale of buried bloodlines, class divides, and buried truths gripped you, subscribe to this channel. Because what began in a cemetery is about to become the most devastating revelation in one of the most powerful families in America. 2 weeks later, the Blackwood Estate's private library no longer felt like a sanctuary. It had become a war room. Investigator reports blanketed the antique mahogany table, century-old with now serving as a staging ground for a different kind of battle. Victoria sat at the head, her icy blue eyes scanning each dossier like a hawk. Single. No known family. Works 2 jobs, 60 hours a week, she murmured, flipping through the documents. Lives in a 1-bedroom flat on the east side. No college degree. And she's raising my grandson in that. David Chun, her longtime personal assistant, stood beside her in silence. He had watched Victoria dismantle corporations, ruin hostile board members, and get billion-dollar deals without so much as blinking. But this was different. This was personal. "What about the child's mother?" she asked, tapping one page with a manicured nail. David opened a separate file, frowning. That's where it gets strange. No birth certificate, no hospital record, no documentation of who gave birth to Tyler. It's as if his biological mother does exist. Victoria's jaw tightened. When Adrian had died, she had interrogated every corner of his life, every friend, every business associate, every bank transaction, and yet this child had slipped through the cracks, or had been hidden. "Schedule a meeting," she said coldly. "I want Jasmine in my office. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. The next day, Jasmine stood in front of the soaring, mirrored towers of Blackwood Industries, clutching her thrift store suit jacket tighter around her shoulders. The wind whipped her curls, and the building's reflection warped her image until she barely recognized herself. Her stomach twisted, but she walked in anyway, because she had nothing left to lose and too much to protect. Victoria welcomed her into the top-floor office like a queen receiving a challenger on sacred ground. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a sweeping view of the city skyline, a deliberate display of dominance, every inch designed to intimidate, and both women knew it. The office smelled of wealth, polished wood, rare leather, and control. Victoria gestured with a manicured hand toward the low-seated chair across from her own elevated throne. "Sit down," she said, her tone cool, clinical. "We need to talk about Tyler." But Jasmine remained standing, her back straight, eyes level. "I'd rather stand." "Thank you." Victoria arched a brow, but let it pass. "As you wish." She opened a sleek leather folder on her desk and began flipping through pages with surgical precision. "I've looked into you, Miss Washington. 2 jobs, no savings, living in conditions that are, frankly, unfit for a child." "Tyler is well cared for," Jasmine replied, her voice even and unwavering. "And he is loved." A thin smile crept across Victoria's lips, one that never touched her eyes. "I'm sure you do your best. But a Blackwood child deserves more than your best. He deserves the best money can buy." Jasmine didn't blink. "And what exactly are you suggesting?" Victoria slid a check across the table. $200,000. For starters, Tyler comes to live with me. He'll get the education he deserves. The life Adrian would have wanted for him. You can visit him on weekends, of course. Jasmine stared at the check like it was something venomous. "Are you tried by my son?" "He's not your son," Victoria snapped, the veneer cracking. "He's my grandson, blood of my blood. And frankly, a waitress in her 20s can't give him what a family like ours can." "Family?" Jasmine laughed, a sound so dry and hollow it echoed in the sterile silence of the room. "Victoria, may I call you that? You want to talk about family? Tyler's called me Mom for 3 years. I hold him when he has nightmares. I teach him math at the kitchen table. I read him bedtime stories until he falls asleep. That's family." Victoria stood abruptly, towering over Jasmine, her voice laced with condescension. "Noble sentiments. But reality is harsh. You work yourself to the bone just to keep the lights on. Tyler deserves private school, first-class travel, a future you can't even begin to imagine. And he deserves unconditional love." Jasmine shot back, her voice suddenly sharp as glass. "Something you clearly didn't give your own son." The room went silent. For a heartbeat, even the city outside seemed to hold its breath. Victoria's jaw clenched, and for the first time in decades, she felt exposed. "How dare you?" she hissed. But Jasmine didn't back down. "Adrian told me about you, about the birthday parties you skipped, the games you never went to, the cold, perfect gifts you sent through assistants. He didn't want that for Tyler. He didn't want you for Tyler." "You don't know me," Victoria growled. "No," Jasmine said softly, "but I knew your son, and I know why he never told you about Tyler." She reached down, picked up the check with her fingertips, and tore it slowly in half. The pieces fluttered to the carpet like wilted petals from a dead flower. "Tyler isn't for sale." Victoria's eyes narrowed to slits. Then we'll do this the hard way. I have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers, investigators, government contacts. I can prove in court that a single mother with no degree, living in poverty, is unfit to raise a Blackwood heir. Jasmine smiled. It was the first real smile she'd given since stepping into that office. And something in that smile, something calm, almost amused, made Victoria hesitate. You're assuming I'm just a poor waitress you can bully, Jasmine said gently. But there are things you haven't uncovered yet. About me, about Adrian, about Tyler. She started for the door, her heels silent on the expensive flooring. At the threshold, she turned back. And Victoria? Her voice dropped like a whisper of thunder. The next time you want to talk about Tyler, it will be on my terms, not yours. Then she was gone. Victoria stood frozen in her office, the torn check littering the floor like remnants of a war she hadn't expected to lose. She stared at the door Jasmine had just walked through, still half expecting her to come back. But she didn't. Someone had walked out of a negotiation with Victoria Blackwood, not just unbroken, but in control. What disturbed her most wasn't the defiance, the rejection, or even the challenge. It was a calm, measured certainty in Jasmine's eyes, as if she held a secret, as if she'd seen behind Victoria's fortress of power and found nothing there to fear. For the first time in her life, Victoria Blackwood felt as though she was being watched, studied by someone who saw her clearly and wasn't the least bit impressed. And she had a terrible feeling that the real game had only just begun. 3 days after the confrontation in her office, Victoria Blackwood received a phone call that sent a tremor through her control world. It was Richard Thornton, her lead attorney and longtime confidant, a man who, in 20 years of ruthless legal combat, had never once sounded unsure himself. But today, his voice was tight, cautious. Victoria, we have a situation. It's about the custody case. She swirled her coffee absent-mindedly, half listening. Let me guess. Miss Washington finally scraped together enough coins for a public defender? There was a pause. She's being represented pro bono. Victoria chuckled. That's cute. What charity wasted their time? It's not a charity, Richard said. It's Morrison, Caldwell, and Pierce. Victoria froze. Her cup slipped slightly in her grip. I beg your pardon? Morrison, Caldwell, and Pierce, he repeated, almost reluctantly. They've already filed a preventive petition. They're claiming any attempt to remove the child would constitute legal kidnapping under the basis of socioeconomic discrimination. For a moment, Victoria said nothing. Then, with sudden fury, she slammed the phone down hard enough to crack the receiver. Morrison, Caldwell, and Pierce was one of the top 3 law firms in the country, experts in civil rights litigation, and undefeated in high-profile courtroom battles. Jasmine had just played her first card, and it was one hell of a card. Meanwhile, in the modest one-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city, Jasmine Washington was not alone. Her humble living room, once home only to bedtime stories and Tyler's toys, now pulsed with quiet purpose. Around her sat people Victoria Blackwood could never have imagined gathering under one roof. Dr. Michael Chun, a respected law professor at Columbia, sorted through a thick binder of legal documents and evidence. Beside him, investigative journalist Amanda Torres tapped away at her laptop, known in journalistic circles for her exposés on political corruption and corporate fraud. And at the heart of it all, sitting like a quiet storm, was Helen Washington, a poised woman in her early 50s, elegant and razor-sharp, whose presence radiated both affection and authority. Helen, Jasmine said as she hugged her aunt tightly, "Thank you for coming. I know the flight from Chicago wasn't easy." "When you told me the time had finally come," Helen replied, her tone both grave and warm, "I cleared my schedule. We've waited 3 years for this moment." Tyler played peacefully on the floor, his small world still filled with innocence, oblivious to the battle lines forming around him. Dr. Chun opened the dossier in front of him and looked at Jasmine. "Are you absolutely sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "There's no turning back once we begin. Victoria Blackwood has vast resources. She'll wage war." Jasmine's voice was steady. "I've been preparing for this moment since the night Adrian died. Every night class, every law book, Every connection I built, it's all been for Tyler and for Adrienne's memory. Amanda looked up. Your documentation is meticulous. 3 years' worth of records on Blackwood Industries, bribes, manipulated city contracts, even labor violations buried under shell corporations. This could be the tip of something huge. Helen walked to the window, gazing out at the neighborhood Victoria would probably consider unworthy. My niece has been studying every move Victoria's made since Adrienne's funeral. She thinks she's untouchable. She has no idea Jasmine's been preparing to dismantle her. She taught business law at the University of Chicago for 30 years, Jasmine added, nodding toward her aunt. She taught me that knowledge is the one thing they can't buy or steal. Just then, Jasmine's phone rang. It was Victoria. Jasmine placed it on speaker, letting the room hear what she already expected to be fire and venom. What game are you playing? Victoria barked. Morrison, Caldwell, and Pierce? How does a waitress afford representation like that? Victoria, Jasmine said coolly, I warned you. There are things about me you don't know. I don't care what tricks you've pulled. Tyler is my grandson. I have unlimited resources to get what I want. Unlimited resources? Jasmine looked around the room at the experts and allies who had gathered, not because she paid them, but because they believed in her. You're assuming money is the only form of power. But what if I told you there's something far stronger? And what would that be? Victoria sneered. The truth. Victoria laughed, dismissive. Truth doesn't pay for elite lawyers. You're right, Jasmine said, her tone sharpening. But the truth about your empire, how it's built on fraudulent contracts, bribes, tax evasion, that truth is worth a lot more than money to the right people. Silence. For the first time since their war began, Victoria had no immediate comeback. You're bluffing, she finally said, though her voice trembled slightly. Actually, Jasmine replied, glancing at Amanda. Amanda Torres from the Metropolitan would like a word. Amanda took the phone. Good afternoon, Miss Blackwood. I'm wrapping an investigative series on unethical corporate behavior. I'd like to offer you a chance to comment on our findings before we go to print. The line went dead. Victoria had hung up. Helen smiled from the corner. You've learned well, Jasmine. Never go head-to-head when you can flank. Dr. Chun closed his briefcase with a quiet snap. The legal strategy is solid. There's precedent. Courts have ruled that removing a child purely due to socioeconomic differences is discriminatory. And I have 3 years of evidence, Amanda added. Shell companies. Hidden payments to elected officials. Environmental violations swept under the rug. Enough to obliterate her public image. Jasmine bent down to pick up Tyler, who smiled at her with wide, trusting eyes. She kissed the top of his head and looked around the room at the team assembled for war. What Victoria doesn't understand, she said softly, is that I'm not just fighting for Tyler anymore. She held her son close, but her gaze was steady, pointed, unwavering. I'm fighting for every woman who's ever been told she's not enough because of where she came from. I'm fighting for every child whose voice has been buried under money and power. And I'm fighting for Adrien, because he died before he could tell the world who he really was. In the distance, the storm clouds gathered again, but this time, Jasmine was ready. I'm fighting against a system that believes money buys everything, Jasmine said, her voice low but unshakable, including the right to destroy families. Helen stepped forward and placed a steadying hand on Jasmine's shoulder. Your mother will be proud of you, daughter. She always said education was the one inheritance no one could ever take away. Jasmine turned to the group. And Helen raised me after my parents died. She taught me that it's not about where you come from, but where you're going. And sometimes, to protect what you love, you have to be willing to go to war. As if on cue, the phone rang again. Jasmine picked it up, then raised her eyebrows as she recognized caller. Victoria's lawyer, she said, placing it on speaker. Miss Washington, came the uneasy voice of Richard Thornton. My client would like to propose a settlement, $500,000 in supervised visits. Jasmine looked at the room. Dr. Chun, Amanda, and Helen all shook their heads. Mr. Thornton, she replied firmly, tell your client that Tyler is not for sale at any price. and inform her that she has 48 hours to withdraw all legal threats against our family, or else. On Monday morning, the Metropolitan Journal will begin publishing a full expose on Blackwood Industries' criminal practices, and I imagine the IRS will be very interested in the documents we've obtained." She hung up before he could respond. Amanda let out a low whistle and leaned back. "Jasmine, are you ready for this? Once we publish, Victoria will come for you with everything she's got." Jasmine looked down at Tyler, peacefully asleep in her arms. "Amanda, I've lived 3 years knowing this day would come. Victoria thinks money makes her invincible, but she's never gone up against someone with time and a reason to prepare." Dr. Chun stood and collected his files. "The legal petition goes out tomorrow. We have solid precedent. Cases where courts ruled that removing children based on socioeconomic grounds is discriminatory." Helen stepped forward and kissed Jasmine's forehead. "Remember, daughter, they may have the money, but we have the truth." That night, after the apartment had quieted and Tyler was tucked safely in bed, Jasmine sat on the floor beside an old chest. She opened it slowly, as if unlocking the past. Inside were carefully preserved records, diplomas from Knight Law School, management certificates, glowing letters of recommendation from professors who had become her mentors. At the very bottom, she pulled out a photograph. It was a simple snapshot. Her, Adrian, and a young woman with fair skin and soft eyes. A woman Victoria had never seen. A woman who explained everything. Jessica, the photograph wasn't just proof of Tyler's mother. It was the keystone of Jasmine's years-long preparation. The secret that gave her the strength to challenge one of the most powerful women in the country. Victoria Blackwood had no idea the true storm that was coming. Because this custody battle, it had only ever been the first move in a much larger game. A game Jasmine had been planning since the day Adrian died. And one that, if executed properly, would not only destroy Victoria's reputation, but burn the entire Blackwood empire to the ground. On Monday morning, Victoria awoke to 37 missed calls. Her assistant, David, was waiting outside her bedroom door, pale and visibly shaken. "Victoria," he said, clutching a tablet, "you need to see this." The screen lit up with a bold headline of the Metropolitan Journal. "Empire built on corruption. Leaked documents reveal decades of crime inside Blackwood Industries." Victoria's knees buckled. She sank onto the edge of bed, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Below the headline, scanned documents glared back at her. Fraudulent contracts, offshore accounts, political bribes, illegal mergers. Her life's work laid bare, page by damning page. "How? How did they get this?" she whispered. The article included photos from secret meetings she thought were untraceable. Audio transcript of conversations in rooms she believed secure. Every skeleton she'd buried, now dancing across national media. Her phone rang again. It was Richard. "It's a complete disaster," he said. "No pleasantries. The IRS has already issued search warrants. The FBI is en route to your estate. And it gets worse. The SEC has frozen all Blackwood Industries trading. Your accounts." Victoria didn't wait. She hung up and immediately called Jasmine, her hand trembling with barely contained rage. "You!" she shouted when Jasmine answered. "You did this to me. How dare you destroy my life?" "Good morning, Victoria," Jasmine said calmly. "I imagine you've seen the news." "I'll destroy you," Victoria snarled. "I'll use everything I have." "What resources?" Jasmine asked quietly. Victoria rushed to her desk and frantically typed into her banking portals. "Access denied." She tried again. "Access denied." Her breath caught. "This is impossible." "There's something my investigators didn't include in their reports," Jasmine continued. "Amanda Torres doesn't work alone. She has a team specializing in financial crime. Every fraudulent document you've signed in the last 20 years has been tracked. Every shell account. Every wire transfer." The TV flickered to life in the next room. Reporters stood in front of Blackwood headquarters, narrating the fall of a titan. Employees were shown leaving the building, carrying boxes. The empire Victoria had built, brick by deceptive brick, was crumbling live on national television. "Why?" Victoria asked, her voice hoarse, cracking. "Why do this to me?" "Because," Jasmine said, voice thick with truth, "you never once asked about Tyler's mother." Victoria went still. Her name was Jessica Blackwood. A long silence. "That's not possible," Victoria murmured. "She was the daughter of Robert Blackwood. Your cousin, the same cousin you betrayed in 1995 to steal his share of the company." Memory struck her like ice water. Robert, eager and bright, signing documents he hadn't understood. The lies, the smear campaign, his quiet disappearance, the family silence that followed. "Jessica grew up in poverty because of you," Jasmine said. "She met Adrian in college. They fell in love. But she never told him who she really was, because she was terrified you'd ruin her life the way you ruined her father's." Victoria remembered, vaguely, Robert mentioning a daughter once. Then nothing. "When Jessica died giving birth to Tyler, Adrian came to me," Jasmine continued. "I was her best friend. He begged me to take care of Tyler. But Adrian also found out the truth, what you did to Jessica's family. He started digging. He found everything." "Adrian knew," Victoria whispered. "He knew what I did. He spent the last months of his life gathering evidence, contracts, voice memos, financial records. He gave it all to me. He asked me to wait until the moment you were most vulnerable." Outside, black SUVs rolled into Victoria's gated estate. The FBI had arrived. Victoria opened her mouth. "The accident." "It wasn't an accident," Jasmine said coldly. "Adrian uncovered a laundering scheme involving very dangerous people. The crash was no coincidence. He died trying to protect his son. They were people you hired to handle problems," Jasmine said quietly. "They killed your own son, Victoria." The word struck Victoria like a sledgehammer. Her knees gave out, and she sank into the leather chair, her face ashen. Adrian hadn't died by accident. He had died because he had uncovered the truth about her crimes. Her greed hadn't just built an empire. It had buried her only son. "Tyler," Jasmine continued, her voice rising with steady resolve, "is the last legitimate Blackwood. Jessica was the rightful heir to a fortune you stole. And now, with your accounts frozen and your company stripped from you, Tyler finally has what was always his." Upstairs, the sound of boots thundered on the marble staircase. Shouts rang out. "FBI, open the door!" Victoria looked at Jasmine, eyes wide, the horror settling in her bones. "You planned this for 3 years," she whispered, the truth dawning too late. "Adrian taught me that patience," Jasmine replied, "is the sharpest form of justice. Every document I saved, every night class I took, every ally I cultivated, it was all leading to this moment." The door burst open. Armed federal agents entered in formation, their voices sharp and commanding. "Victoria Blackwood, you are under arrest for tax fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." The cold steel of handcuffs bit into Victoria's wrists. She barely registered the flash of cameras outside as reporters captured the arrest, broadcast live, the fall of a titan. From behind the agents, Jasmine stepped back into the hall. Her voice reached Victoria one final time. "Tyler will grow up knowing the truth," she said. "He'll know that justice may come slowly, but it always comes." That afternoon, Jasmine sat in the park, watching Tyler play on the playground. The sun warmed the grass, and the sound of his laughter mingled with the rustle of leaves. Her phone buzzed. "Daughter," Helen said on the other end, "I saw the news. How you feel?" Jasmine closed her eyes, her heart full. Like Adrian can finally rest in peace. And Tyler will grow up knowing that his family stood for justice. Not revenge. Justice. What Victoria never understood until it was too late was that Jasmine wasn't just a waitress with a grudge. She was the fierce guardian of a stolen legacy. A woman who turned years of quiet preparation into the most elegant execution of justice the courts had ever seen. 2 years later, Millbrook Women's State Prison was a far cry from the penthouse Victoria once ruled. Now she stood in line in a wrinkled orange uniform, folding laundry for $2.50 an hour. Her hands, once manicured for board meetings, were cracked and raw from bleach. The irony was cruel and complete. Blackwood, you have a visitor. A guard announced. Victoria expected a lawyer, or maybe a journalist. Instead, Jasmine walked into the visiting room, wearing a sleek navy suit and heels that clicked with power. She sat across from her, poised and serene. "I've come with news," Jasmine said, sliding a folder across the table. Tyler was just accepted to Phillips Academy. Full scholarship. Victoria blinked. "Adrienne's school?" Jasmine nodded. "He'll study music. Violin, just like his father. His teacher says he's a natural." Victoria looked down at the folder. Inside were photographs. Tyler beaming in a school uniform, bow in hand, framed against autumn leaves. A happy child. A future unburdened. "How?" Victoria asked. "How can you afford all this?" Jasmine leaned back, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. "The courts returned everything you stole from Jessica's family. Tyler is now the legal heir to the Blackwood estate." Victoria exhaled slowly. "And you? What did you get?" "I got the chance to give Tyler what you never gave Adrienne," Jasmine said softly. "A family built on love, not wealth." She stood, gathering her bag. "And the peace of knowing Jessica and Adrienne can finally rest. Tyler is safe now. He's loved, and that's all that ever mattered." Miles away, in a lakeside Connecticut home, surrounded by towering pines, Tyler raced through the garden. Jasmine stood on the porch, a framed MBA diploma behind her, watching him with pride. "Mom!" Tyler shouted, violin case in hand. "Can I play for you?" Jasmine smiled, her heart full. "Of course, my love." Helen Washington visited often, sitting with Tyler on the porch, telling him stories of his mother and grandfather. "Legacy," she said, "is about what you leave behind, not in vaults or stock portfolios, but in values and choices." One day, Jasmine said to Tyler, "You know, baby, the best revenge isn't destroying someone who tried to hurt you. It's building a life so full of joy and purpose that they regret not being part of it." Tyler would grow up knowing that his identity wasn't defined by his skin color, or his family's mistakes, or the money that once corrupted his bloodline. He would grow up knowing that character, not wealth, is what makes a person powerful. Victoria Blackwood had tried to buy a grandson. She believed family was just another asset. But she learned, too late, that love can't be bought. It's earned moment by moment, through sacrifice and presence. Jasmine's real triumph wasn't in destroying Victoria. It was in building something she never could, a life of purpose, a home rooted in love, and a child raised with dignity. In the end, persistence and truth always outlast arrogance and greed. Jasmine proved that even against impossible odds, justice will find its voice and speak louder than money ever could.